Well, extreme weather continues to ravage Europe this summer, now in the form of severe flooding. At least 6 people have died after storms hit Slovenia on Friday. Floodwater has forced thousands of people to flee their homes, and authorities are putting the material damage at more than 500 million euros.
It's Slovenia's worst natural disaster since achieving independence in the early 1990s. Roads have turned into rivers, bridges have collapsed. Videos are being shared on social media, showing people fleeing the floodwaters. A French tourist films the moment her companion was rescued from their lodgings in Krnica in northwestern Slovenia. The flooding and landslides have caused enormous damage. Entire communities have been devastated. The raging waters almost completely wiped out Prevalje in northern Slovenia.
It's an apocalypse, a total disaster. Unfortunately, since we're all dealing with the same trouble, there's nothing we can do. It's very sad.
On Monday, residents were busy clearing away the mud, revealing the full extent of the destruction.
We've suffered severe damage. The enormous financial loss has ruined us. The damage amounts to tens, if not hundreds of millions of euros. It will take a large amount of money to restore everything.
Even though the rains have let up, rescue workers are now struggling with the threat of landslides, not just in Slovenia, but also here in the southern Austrian village of St. Nikolai im Zausal. The risk of mud avalanches is now especially high.
We saw the mountainside collapsing, but we were powerless to stop it.
It is hoped that plastic tarps like these will help prevent more landslides. Hundreds of people have been evacuated and brought to emergency shelters, just in case. Slovenia has asked the EU and NATO for aid, especially with technical devices and military helicopters, as well as several prefabricated bridges up to 40 meters long to help access regions that are now cut off.
Let's get across to our correspondent Rosie Bichard reporting from Slovenia's town of Prevalje in the north of the country that has been hit hard by that flooding. Rosie, we saw some really dramatic pictures there, and it looks like a bit of a mess where you are too. Can you tell us more about the situation?
Absolutely. The scene does remain dramatic behind me. That is an entirely collapsed bridge, and local authorities here are doing their best to try and clean it up and get it reconstructed, and also to add other kind of improvised bridges further down the rivers so that the other side of the bank, which has been most heavily impacted, can be crossed. Now, we've spoken to local officials here, and they've told us that now, as you see, the sun is shining, and in the light of day, their priority is to try and get this cleaned up. But there are also some other dangers. Below me here, officials are trying to work to restore a gas pipeline. As you can see, the river is still flowing pretty fast. But there's also another risk which is still facing residents here, particularly a little bit further down this river, and that is the risk of mudslides. There are geologists on the scene monitoring the situation, and some people have been evacuated for fear of the dangers that that may pose still in the coming days, despite the fact that the weather is now certainly turned more merciful than the previous weekend.
Yeah, just to get a sense of perspective, we understand that most of Slovenia's population has been affected in some way by this natural disaster. Can you help put that into perspective for us?
This is a small country, a relatively small European country with a population of about 2 million people, and large swathes of the country were affected by the storms. But because of the small nature of the population, most people here, we're told, know somebody that's impacted directly. And of course, there's the impact also on businesses. Now, with that community sense, there is a real sense of solidarity here. Just in the past few minutes, we've seen dozens of people arriving with bottles of fresh water, with shovels, ready to come and volunteer to try and help. And authorities have even had to issue a warning to say, you know, if you want to volunteer with the cleanup, please make sure you're not too vulnerable, that you're not someone who's pregnant or a child, because of the risks of infectious disease, because more people are turning up to volunteer than there's the infrastructure necessarily to help with. So there certainly is a sense of community and a sense of solidarity here in this town and in the surrounding ones, as people trying to clean up the mess, the damage that has been wrought by these floods.
It's an outpouring of help from volunteers, but what about the official response? What have we seen there so far?
Well, local officials we've seen have had people just coming up to them saying, look, we've suffered this damage to our house or our property. What can we do? And the government has been doing what it can. We've seen military out here, for example. But as a small country, Slovenia has called on help from its neighbours, from the European Union and from NATO. And we know that Germany is donating some prefabricated bridges. France is also going to be donating some machinery. There will be some helicopters on the way. So Slovenia has certainly been calling out for help. European Union countries have answered, and more help is expected to be announced in the coming days.
Well, thank you so much for your reporting. That is Rosie Bichard in Prevalje, Slovenia.